The year is 2099, near Earth orbit, the Polyus Reconnaissance and Research Ship. Crew, 12,223 people. In the black abyss of space, the pole shone like an artificial star, reflecting the light of the distant sun. Its elongated body, dotted with labyrinths of technical sections, antennas and observation domes, resembled the silhouette of a giant predator frozen in zero gravity. Slowly but steadily, it slid into orbit, enveloped in a scattering of satellites and shuttles scurrying along its huge body. The spaceship was the crown of a human dream, born in the fire of a 1,000-year struggle, in an effort to escape beyond the borders of his native world. Everyone built it. Engineers and workers from different countries, scientists dreaming of stars, and politicians who forgot their differences in the face of a great goal. The united humanity has put everything into it: reason, work, hope. Life was bubbling inside the ship. Engineers, pilots, and researchers were walking along the narrow corridors, illuminated by a soft bluish light. Some were in a hurry to check the systems again, while others were discussing the latest data from the laboratories. Commands were being given somewhere in the training compartments. Doctors were checking the condition of the crew in the medical unit, and rows of green plants were slowly stretching towards the light in the hydroponic gardens. In the huge viewing rooms, giant screens showed the cosmos in all its pristine infinity. In these dark halls, amidst the soft flickering of appliances, people stopped, staring into the abyss. The path to the unknown lay before them. But no matter how far the road seemed, everyone who looked into the observation domes inevitably shifted their gaze below. The blue light of the home planet penetrated through the transparent panels, reflecting in the eyes of the crew. The Earth glowed below, warm, beautiful, inviting, and dear. She was home. And despite the thousands of kilometers of emptiness between them, the people at the pole continued to feel her breath. Soon, the ship was about to embark on its first great passage. No one knew what lay ahead. But everyone knew one thing. They were part of a great story. And the pole was her first step. Rear Admiral Alexei Belousov sat in the command room, slowly sipping hot coffee. Real, strong, scalding. His tart scent seemed to make its way into every corner of the cabin, mixing with the dry, sterile air of the ship. Belousov held the cup in his hands as if it were something precious, and idly watched as circles ran across the surface of the black liquid from the barely noticeable vibration of the case. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Half a century of life. Half a century of travel. From the noisy officer meetings on Earth to this huge floating hulk. The pole was the pinnacle of everything humanity aspired to. And he, Belousov, became a part of it. The captain of the ship. He slowly looked up. There were portraits on the walls in front of him. In an even formation, in massive frames, the faces of the past looked at him. Admirals of great eras, lords of the seas, strategists, conquerors of the open spaces. Peter the Great, with a wise, penetrating gaze, clutching a map of the future Russian Empire. Pavel Nakhimov, stern and determined. Admiral Kornilov, who died near Sevastopol, but did not flinch before the enemy. Lazarev, Ushakov, Makarov. Behind them are American and British naval commanders, whose names once reverberated around the world. And below are the battle scenes, canvases covered with the reflections of fire, scattered ships, the roar of cannons. Gangut, Chesma, Trafalgar, Tsushima, Jutland, Midway. Each of these battles was a story. Each was a turning point in the fate of nations. Belousov grinned. How things have changed. There were no more wars on Earth. There were no great naval battles. There were no flag confrontations. The Navy is a thing of the past. Borders disappeared. Alliances disappeared. The division into ours and strangers disappeared. In the early days, the world existed without fear of tomorrow. People did not expect war. People were looking at the sky, the noon of humanity. Polyus was not born to fight. He was not created for battles, not for conquests. It was not a warship, but a step into infinity. The personification of the desire to go beyond the known, to leave behind all fears, all contradictions. In his command room, there was no longer a division between Russians and Americans, Europeans and Asians. They were a team, one nation, the people of Earth. Belousov looked at the portraits again. He saw irony in the eyes of the generals. The wars are over. The world that their victories and defeats had been building for centuries no longer needed guns and gunfire. He took a deep breath and turned his gaze to the main screen. Powerful generators hummed in the depths of the ship, gradually increasing their power. The vibration passed through the metal walls, reverberating through the floors of the living quarters and engineering modules. The people on board the Pole held their breath. Rear Admiral Alexei Belousov stood up, clasping his hands behind his back. The entire crew froze in tense expectation. He saw how people looked at each other, how someone nervously tapped his fingers on the console, how someone looked into the transparent domes, as if saying goodbye to the Earth. The moment that humanity had been waiting for decades was coming. The breakthrough over the Horizon System activation window appeared on the central screen. This mechanism was the crowning achievement of scientific thought, the most daring technology ever created by man. Its development has been going on for many years, while the best minds in the world have been trying to understand the nature of space and how it bends. The basic principle of the device's operation was based on creating a gap in the space-time continuum through which the ship could instantly move to any given point. The chief architect of the system is German engineer Heinrich Raab. A genius obsessed with science, he argued that space is not absolute and can be curved at the right point, creating a passage to another area of the universe. But it took years of research before people dared to apply the technology. There were also doubts. Could a gap in space affect the very flow of time? Can a breach create an uncontrollable effect capable of destroying everything around it? Will the ship tear apart when activated? The experiments have been conducted for decades. From the first mathematical models to laboratory tests, then tests on the outskirts of the solar system, far beyond the Earth. After many checks, the fears were dispelled. At first, the use of a breakthrough beyond the horizon within the solar system was prohibited. The risk was too great. But when the latest simulations showed the absolute stability of the surrounding space, the experiment was approved. Now, aboard the Poleus, the technology was to be put into practice for the first time. The captain gave the command. "Enable the transition preparation system." "Yes, sir." A muffled hum rolled through the ship. The power plants were operating at full capacity, redistributing energy to the main reactor. Somewhere in the depths of the ship, massive generator rings began to rotate, the key components of the device. Their rotation gradually gained momentum, creating powerful energy fields around them. Belousov watched the screens. Sensors recorded sharp bursts of energy. Diagrams flashed on the monitors, analyzing what was happening. The pole was ready. The captain turned his gaze to the land, still visible below, blue, shining, native. He took a deep breath and gave the decisive order. Activation. Alarm lights flashed all over the command room at once, turning the space a deep scarlet. The siren pierced his ears, reverberating through the ship with a hollow, heavy echo. Belousov abruptly turned to the screens where alarming messages were flashing. "Report," he ordered, without taking his eyes off the panoramic screen. Ho Jin, a leading scientist in navigation and astronomical research, appeared on the display. His face, usually calm and collected, was now tense, his forehead glistening with perspiration. "Sir, the system is working without errors. The scanners have detected the objects." Belousov clenched his teeth. What kind of objects? From where? The computer voice of the Pole spoke in a flat, emotionless tone. "Multiple objects have been detected approaching. The source is the outer orbit of Mars. The speed is 0.02 light. The objects have reached the moon. The expected arrival time in near Earth space is 15 minutes and 27 seconds. Belousov looked at the tactical analysis screen. The system displayed a schematic image of the solar system. Unidentified dots shone on it, elongated into a dense wedge, rapidly approaching the Earth. In the depths of the screen, through the emptiness of space, the outlines of ships were drawn. The black ones. Soundless. They did not cast reflections, did not emit heat, and did not create radio interference. They floated in the darkness, moving smoothly, almost lazily, but with frightening inevitability. Strangers. Belousov stood motionless. His heart was beating steadily, but there was an icy chill in his chest. "Captain, they're coming!" Haojin spoke softly, his voice sounding hollow, as if through a thick silence. "General alarm," Belousov said firmly. "Combat mode. All posts prepare defensive positions." The team froze. Someone swallowed noisily. The Polyus ship was preparing to meet the unknown, and no one knew how it would end. Red markers flashed on the screens. The ship's sensors detected a powerful burst of energy. Belousov abruptly turned to the cameraman. "Report!" The tactical analysis officer froze at the console, his face white, his eyes glued to the monitor. "Sir, one of the objects. He's accumulating energy. Something's going on." An image appeared on the main screen. The black ship hanging by the moon seemed to have awakened. His body, which had previously absorbed light, began to flicker, not with light, but with darkness, which seemed to shrink inside, accumulating into a single point. "My God," someone whispered in the control room. Suddenly the energy burst out. A black, shapeless stream rushed towards the ground. There were no flashes, no traces of plasma or lasers, only absolute darkness, splitting space and rushing down to the planet. Time was frozen in the control room. "This is an attack!" Belousov's voice broke the silence, echoing through the ship. "The breakthrough over the Horizon system is ready for battle. Open the wormhole. Throw these black ships to the fucking mother." The crew rushed to the posts. "The Pole has ceased to be just a research ship. He was a weapon now." Manipulator drones, hundreds of metal creatures designed to open the wormhole portal, rushed out of the hangar compartments into space. They soared into outer space, forming a giant grid woven from gravity control points. Their hulls opened, releasing directional waves that began to distort the space in front of the ship. The space wavered. A dark sphere formed in the center, its edges trembling like the stretched fabric of reality, ready to tear. A wormhole was being born, but the black ships did not react. They didn't turn around. They didn't answer. Their destination was Earth. Transmission from Earth. An outgoing signal from the command center on the ground lit up on the screens. The connection was unstable and fading, but the voice of the duty officer of the Orbital Defense Control Center was recorded. "Polyus, what's going on?" "We are seeing abnormal activity. An impact on the stratosphere has been recorded. I repeat, an unidentified object has struck. The atmospheric layers are unstable. A surge of gravitational pressure." His voice was trembling, but it remained professionally clear. "There is destruction in Central Europe. Black structures. It's not a weapon. We're losing touch with the regions. Moscow, Berlin, Paris." The transmission stopped. Belousov made a decision. "Activate the wormhole. The crucial moment has arrived." Alarms buzzed in the control room of the Polyus, turning the command center an ominous red. The space in front of the ship was shaking and cracking, as if an invisible giant was slowly tearing apart the fabric of the universe. The wormhole opened. She didn't shine like in the old sci-fi movies. There were no bright flashes or iridescent colors. It was bottomless, like the mouth of a predator swallowing light. Its edges were breathing. They bent and vibrated, as if the universe itself was trying to pull back the gaping wound in the cosmic universe. "Target fixation." The tactical officer's voice was strained but clear. one of the objects under the influence of gravitational waves. On the screen, one of the black ships trembled. He didn't move on his own. He was being sucked in. The great silent machine, frozen in the dark, was now being torn apart by forces that even its creators could not control. The hull of the black ship began to shrink, stretch, as if someone had tried to flatten it, turn it into a useless piece of metal. The strange structures on the ship's surface trembled and pulsed like living flesh resisting death. The ship was moving towards the abyss. Belousov clenched his fists. It worked. But then something went wrong. "Sir." The operator's voice trailed off. Suddenly, the pole shuddered. The ship moved forward. The wormhole had captured him too. New warnings flashed in the control room. "Gravity waves are unstable! Danger of absorption! Disable the stabilizers. Emergency maneuvering." "It doesn't help. We've lost control." The ship was slowly but inexorably creeping into the abyss. Gravity changed direction. People felt their bodies being pulled forward even though the straps were secured. The air itself seemed to become heavy, constricting his chest, slowing his breathing. One last look at the Earth. Belousov grabbed the handrail and turned to the view screen. The blue planet. She was moving away. Its light was slowly fading beyond the horizon of the wormhole. The last thing the captain saw was the Earth surrounded by the shadows of black ships. Then darkness. "Hold on!" Belousov bellowed. "The pole has disappeared!" A year has passed since the pole disappeared into the wormhole, the year in which humanity lost its last war. The full-scale invasion began instantly. Black ships raced across the sky like the embodiment of darkness itself, flooding the cities with deadly waves. Their blows did not explode, did not burn, did not destroy in the usual way. They were doing laundry. Everything that entered their target area disappeared. Giant megacities crumbled into the void, as if they had never existed, and in their place there were only black craters stretching into infinity. When the flood started, there was no point in fighting anymore. The melting of Antarctica's glaciers released huge masses of water that poured onto land with devastating force. The cities were drowning one after another. Berlin, New York, London, Moscow. They all disappeared under the black water. The last lines of defense were flooded before they could open fire. People were fleeing to higher ground, but there was less land left. Now there were only broken islands on the planet, sticking out above the restless dark surface, covered with fog. The ocean was dead. The water, which once reflected the blue sky, has now become thick, oily, and black. She didn't shine in the sun, because there was no sun anymore. Darkness enveloped the earth. Low clouds froze like a leaden curtain, hiding the stars. It wasn't raining. The wind wasn't blowing. Only the occasional flash of distant lightning broke the endless twilight. The survivors were hiding among the ruins. The skeletons of skyscrapers sticking out of the water served as a shelter for them. People gathered in small groups, rummaged through sunken warehouses in search of food, and searched for fresh water. They did not light a fire, did not shout, did not give signals. No one called for help. There was no help. Something was lurking in the depths of the dead ocean. No one could tell what exactly was hiding there, but everyone knew that once you entered the water, you would disappear. No splash, no scream, no struggle. Just one moment, and you're gone. People called it the abyss. They were afraid to even look down. But the sky was the worst. The black ships were still hovering over the planet. They didn't fly away. They didn't move. They were just there. They hung like motionless shadows, spread all over the sky, like eyes looking down. They didn't do anything. They were just waiting. The land no longer belonged to humans. The world froze, and no one knew if he would live on. It's only been 1 year, a year in which the world has changed beyond recognition, and the survivors realized that death is not the worst thing. No one knew why the aliens had left survivors on Earth. The black ships hung in the sky, motionless, like eternal monuments of a dying civilization. But sometimes they sank lower, into the fog that hid the flooded cities, and slowly floated over the ruins, emitting invisible waves that crumbled walls, collapsed bridges, and cracked the remains of houses. Those who tried to hide were found sooner or later. The aliens didn't kill them right away. They did not use weapons. They did not burn cities with napalm. They did not deploy funnels of flame. People disappeared in one place and reappeared in another, in strange black complexes scattered over the remaining patches of land. Huge, angular, covered with a smooth, dark surface, they towered in the midst of a ruined world, and just the sight of them raised an animal panic inside. These camps could not be called prisons or factories. They did not resemble anything created by humans. They didn't emit any light. They didn't create shadows. They seemed to swallow up space itself, which is why, when a person looked at them for too long, black spots began to flash in front of their eyes, and a low hum sounded in their ears. Those who tried to escape from there told terrible things. People were herded into rows in front of smooth, dark mirrors that stood in empty halls. There was no reflection in the mirrors. Or maybe it was, but it wasn't moving the way it should. People stopped being themselves. Their eyes emptied. Their movements became jerky, and their speech was halting, as if they were listening to someone's commands that no one else could hear. Sometimes people simply disappeared. Not in the fog, not behind walls, but right in front of others, slowly dissolving, as if their bodies were being erased from this world. Those who survived the experiments talked about those who controlled them, about the creatures living inside the black ships, but the stories sounded incoherent, frightening, and those who tried to retell them began to shake and suffocate. Some said that these were not bodies, but shadows, that they moved in the air like black smoke, taking on any shape. Others claimed that their bodies were liquid, as if covered with something slippery, but at the same time angular, intermittent, like living statues that changed their appearance every second. Some said they walked like humans, and even resembled them, but not quite. It was as if someone had tried to mold a person from memory, forgetting how the body works. Soon, people began to realize that not everyone wanted to resist. There were those who broke down. They no longer hid, whispered in hiding, or ran when black ships appeared. They stood with their heads up, looking up at the dim sky and waiting. They could be recognized immediately. Empty faces, eyes in which there was no fear, voices that sounded strangely flat, without intonation. They said that the aliens were not the enemy. They insisted that humanity was doomed from the very beginning, that the invasion was not destruction, but purification. There were few of them in the first months, but over time there were more and more of them. They were called worshippers. At first, they just left the survivors' camps. They walked barefoot, through the water, through the remains of the ruins, to where the ships were descending. They raised their hands to the sky. Their lips whispered words that no one understood, and then they disappeared into the black fog. I didn't feel sorry for them. Weak, broken, unnecessary. But soon they started coming back, and it was much scarier. Those who returned were no longer the same. Their skin felt cold and strangely smooth to the touch, like polished bone. Sometimes spots like shadows appeared on their bodies, but they did not disappear even if the person was standing under the sun. Sometimes their pupils would dilate so much that they would consume the entire eye. They were smiling, but it wasn't a human smile. They spoke softly, with a strange gentleness, almost in a whisper, urging others to come with them. Their voices sounded both familiar and foreign. They didn't ask for it. They weren't threatening. They just said it was the right thing to do. Some listened to them. Some of them were able to be restrained. Others were leaving. None of them returned. The survivors began to fear not even the black ships. They were distant, motionless, silent. They were afraid of their own people. Sometimes at night, Worshippers could be heard standing outside the camp and calling someone's name. Softly, affectionately, like an old friend or relative. They knew how to talk to make you want to follow them. Those who did not cover their ears, who listened for too long, got up and left without saying goodbye. If anyone tried to stop them, they didn't resist. After the invasion, the sun disappeared. At first, people thought it was temporary, that one day the wind would disperse the dense clouds and the sky would turn blue again. But as time passed, the black curtain remained motionless. It seemed that she was not just hanging over the planet, but pressing down on it. The sky became dense, frozen, like the lid of a sarcophagus. During the day, it was thick gray. At night, it turned into a black veil without stars and moon. It seemed as if the night itself had frozen in it. Sometimes it moved. If you looked too long, you could see subtle tears, like cracks in rotten fabric, behind which something was moving. The survivors were disappearing. Sometimes various objects fell from the sky to the ground. Sometimes they were metal structures covered with incomprehensible symbols. Sometimes there are black spheres emitting a faint light. They fell onto the roofs of flooded buildings, smashed against rocks. But no one dared to approach them. It happened that bodies fell from the sky. Not human. Some squirmed even after hitting the ground. Those who found them burned them without even trying to figure out what was in front of them. The sky itself seemed to be decomposing, becoming a victim. When cities went underwater and governments disappeared, the world ceased to be united. He was torn to pieces, just like the Earth itself. Humanity, having lost control of the planet, was thrown back into the chaos of primitive fear, where there were no more laws, armies, and protection. No one knew which was worse, the appearance of black ships or people who turned into animals. At first, the remnants of the military tried to restore order. Those who survived the fall of governments, who managed to survive the flood and the destruction of cities, gathered in fortified camps. They called themselves the last defenders of the earth, guarded the supply depots, organized patrols, and set the rules. They wanted to preserve civilization. They wanted to stand up, despite the fear of the sky, despite the monsters that came from the blackness. They were preparing resistance, but they didn't lose to the aliens. They lost to the humans. First, there were the refugees. They came to the military camps with their last hopes, begging to be accepted, to be given food, protection, shelter over their heads. But there wasn't enough food for everyone. Those who were not allowed in were left to die outside the walls. Then the looters came. Those who didn't ask, but took. Those who did not believe in salvation, did not hope for survival. They simply killed for food and for the opportunity to live a day, an hour longer. Gangs of ex-prisoners, ex-soldiers, and distraught refugees scoured the ruins, burning everything in their path. They attacked caravans, cut throats for a piece of bread, for a bottle of water, for medicines. And then the real war began. The military camps were under attack. They fought off attacks for months, hiding behind barricades, guarding warehouses, but their forces were running out. They died in battle, starved, and some went mad with terror. And then there were cults. At first, no one took them seriously. The groups of people praying to the aliens just seemed broken. They gathered at the ruined buildings, whispered words that no one understood, went deep into the ruins and never returned. But then they started killing, alone at first. People disappeared at night, and a few days later they were found near monoliths that stood on flooded streets, in the ruins of cities. Their bodies were distorted, their skin blackened, and their faces were unrecognizable. Then they started acting openly. They came to the camps, captured them, took people away, methodically executed, and took someone away. And no one knew what happened to them next. People began to fear each other more than the black ships. Everyone was on their own now, and there is no power left in this world. No laws, no future, only fear. At first, people thought the invasion was over. Black ships froze in the sky, Flooded cities turned into lifeless swamps, and the survivors began to adapt. They built shelters, looked for food, tried not to attract attention to themselves. But then the monoliths came. They appeared suddenly. One night the place was empty, and the next morning there was something new among the ruins. Huge, smooth and elongated, they rose above the flooded earth like the tombstones of a dead civilization. They couldn't be touched. The hand never touched the surface. People said that the palm just falls into the void. Sometimes people disappeared next to them. Just one step forward and the person is gone. No one saw what was happening to them. No one heard the screams. Those who stood nearby only felt a gust of wind. At first, people tried to burn them, but the void swallowed the fire. At some point, the monoliths began to move. Some cities that survived the flood disappeared without a trace. Survivors said they had seen the monoliths moving through the fog before, and no one knew what would happen if they got too close. One night, one of the groups of survivors sent a human scout who decided to enter the monolith. He's back. He was noticed when he came out of the fog and walked slowly towards the camp. Her movements were too steady, her breathing too quiet. He did not answer the questions, but simply stood next to the fire and looked at the people for a long time, as if trying to recognize them. Then he took out a knife and slit the throat of the nearest person. Everyone froze, not believing what was happening. The scout calmly approached the second one and delivered the same precise blow. Then to the third one. No one was moving. It seemed that they had simply forgotten how to run and resist. The next morning there was no one left in the camp. After the invasion, most of the satellites and radio towers went down. Communication networks collapsed along with the sunken cities, and people were cut off from each other. Only the old shortwave radios could still pick up the signal, but even they more often gave out emptiness or crackling interference. But sometimes the radio waves came alive. At first, these were scattered signals, reports, military commands, fragments of voices talking about disasters, about lost cities, about the resistance holding the line. People listened to them, hoped, and searched for the frequencies spoken by the living. But then the ether started to change. Someone was broadcasting. Sometimes the voice sounded calm, clear, like a radio host on duty. He reported, "The Seaver 17 base is still receiving survivors. Coordinates, 54.28 north latitude, 97.52 east longitude. I repeat, the North 17 base is safe." People were going there, and none of them came back. A week later, the voice changed. Now it was a woman's voice, monotonous, without emotion. He was broadcasting from another place, different base, different coordinates. But everyone who went there disappeared. Then the voices began calling out names. At first it was muffled and indistinct, as if the radio was picking up a conversation far from the receiver. People listened intently, and suddenly, in the noise, someone was saying their name. Those who heard their name left. No one knew where. Sometimes they were found after a few days. They were sitting in the ruins, looking up at the sky, staring into the void, their lips moving soundlessly, repeating something. The aliens did not occupy the Earth. They did not establish control, did not enslave the survivors, did not declare their laws. They just took the planet. Purposefully. Inevitably. It's as if someone found an unattended item and decided that it now belongs to them. Many people were looking for meaning in this. Were you trying to figure out what people were doing wrong? Why the Earth? Why now? The answer was simple. People called them themselves. In 2073, the largest space agencies on the planet completed a project that was supposed to be the first step towards contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. A powerful observatory has been built in the depths of South America, far from megacities and radio interference. Her main goal was not just observation, but the search for intelligent life. And when her system detected an unknown object hundreds of light years away from Earth, humanity did what it had dreamed of for centuries. It sent a signal. Not just an encoded message with mathematical sequences, a powerful pulse signaling that there is life here, that there is a mind here, that there is a civilization here ready for contact. Naive humanity believed that space was a collection of curious researchers who were ready for a peaceful exchange of knowledge. People believed that they would go out into the endless ocean of stars, where they would find their equals and find friends. But the cosmos was not friendly. Space was a wild jungle. Dark, ancient, filled with predators who don't seek dialogue. And if someone reveals themselves, if someone raises their voice, if someone breaks the silence, they will inevitably become prey. The signal did not go unanswered. The answer came in 2099. Black ships, dark skies, flooded cities, and billions of dead. It's just that one civilization found another, and she took what she considered her own.